Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hello and welcome back to the Maple Leafs Lounge. I am your host, Peter Baracchini. As always, I'm joined by my colleague and fellow Maple Leaf writer over at the Hockey Writers, Jim Parsons. Jim, another exciting week. I mean, if you want to call it exciting, I mean, the Maple Leafs going 3-1-1 in their longest road trip of the season. That to me is a win. Obviously, a lot to talk about given that road trip or what has transpired in that road trip. But before we do, how are you doing this week?
Doing okay, doing good. I'm an Oilers guy normally, so they won a hockey game. They finally won one, the Heritage Classic, so that was good news. Connor McDavid is only out for a couple games. That's good news too. And then, of course, keeping up with the Maple Leafs, and they look to be starting to figure things out a little bit. It was not that they were playing terribly, but they were having some defensive gaffes and some lapses and things like that, which they're not perfect, but they're ironing it out a little bit. There's some concerns in Toronto, but some of the things that were plaguing them earlier this season are going away a little bit. So that's good news. So I'll put up, it's all pretty good right now.
Yeah, the early season bumps in the road for both Oilers, more so the Oilers and the Maple Leafs, the Maple Leafs have a winning record, but yeah, it's been a struggle for the Oilers. Maple Leafs have had their moments, but yet, like you said, they're starting to turn things around, which is a very good sign. Not so good for my fantasy hockey team, by the way, but different story. We're here to talk Maple Leafs, not fantasy. Before we get into this show, we at the Hockey Writers have recently expanded our offerings with a Substack dedicated to every team, as well as a general one for each day's best articles. As a Maple Leafs fan, you don't want to miss any of the great content we produce, and our Maple Leaf Substack makes that possible. Sign up to get all the THW's Maple Leafs articles delivered directly into your inbox multiple times per week. A sign-up link can be found in the video description below, and you will get articles from Jim, myself, and every other Maple Leaf writer into your mailbox. Have it with your coffee, catch up on the news of everything that's going on in Leafs Nation. To kick off the show, it's no surprise that Joseph Woll is slowly becoming the starter. It was just recently reported that when this is recorded, the video will most likely be up, that he will be starting against the LA Kings. And at this point right now, there was a lot of a bit of a goalie concern heading in regards to how well is Woll going to replicate last season. We weren't expecting Ilya Samsonov to struggle this early, but Joseph Woll is 3-1 with a 133 goals against average and 961 save percentage. Not only that, we also knew that he came in relief against the Tampa Bay Lightning, got the win there, won against Washington, and looked even more solid against the Dallas Stars. Two important wins during that road trip. Jim, obviously, we wanted to see a bit more of a sample size, but is this sample size enough to say that Joseph Woll is continuing to establish himself as the number one goaltender for this team?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's enough to say that he's continuing to establish himself and head in that direction. To go so far as to say that he's a starter, I wouldn't go there yet. I mean, that's too small a sample size to say, Woll's won the starting job, Samsonov has lost it. Samsonov, your backup all year, and Woll's your starter. I wouldn't go that far. But that's the trend right now. That seems to be the way that things are going. Joseph Woll has played very well, and Samsonov has not played very well. So when you're in that situation, if you're Toronto and wins matter for like every team, especially in Maple Leafs Nation, you got to play the hot hand. So you're going to keep playing Woll until he, either falters or Samsonov has a fantastic game to the point where he, makes that argument he should be in consideration again. So right now it's Joseph Woll for me. Would I go so far as to say that he is the de facto starter for the rest of the year? No, but it's trending that way. So that's the good news, right? You've got at least one goaltender while one is struggling that is playing extremely well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we've seen him play or elevate his play against a top team. I was all for putting him in against the Dallas Stars. Was hoping that he would play his former teammate, Jake Ottinger, but that didn't happen. But he looked really sharp against a top team that was kind of undefeated, didn't have a loss at that point. Now you're getting to see more starts. They're going back to him for LA. Chances are you want to see what he can do against Boston, a divisional opponent that's still up there in the standings, continue to defy the odds given what happened to their team in the offseason. And Wall's just, he's the brick wall for a reason. Looking at the new NHL stats page, in all locations, his save percentage is 961. High danger save percentage, he's third with 915. So again, still early on, but those are some solid numbers that you're seeing from Woll early on in regards to his play in the net. And I agree with you that, it is his net until, there's an outing where he doesn't look great. But even if if the end result is a loss and he still puts up a very strong number, there is no reason to suggest that you could go back to him and say, you know what? Now it's up to, Woll to maintain that presence and maintain that, calm and steady mentality that Max Domi has alluded to. And he's only comparing it to, based on what he's seen, to that of Carey Price. And, obviously early on in his career, you don't want to set high expectations, but you do see the calm presence similar to that of Price. I do think that it is a good opportunity for him to continue to establish himself. Again, small sample, but you want to see what he could do more in these next important games coming up.
Yeah, and the high danger chances, those saves, those are the key ones for me, because when you're doing that, and especially with a defense that is either struggling or injured, and Toronto, their tendency so far has been to give up some of those golden opportunities, you need somebody in net who's going to be able to bail you out, right? And that's the real key here, is that Samsonov has struggled to make some typical saves, and Joseph Woll has made some really strong ones that he probably shouldn't have made. And so when you have that, you've got a guy who's building everybody's confidence. He's building his own confidence. The rest of the lineup is starting to go, okay, well, this is our guy. We feel really good about playing in front of him, because if we make a mistake, he's going to bail us out. That's the stuff that I think is really important for him, because you talked about, if you want to call it swagger, his demeanor, his confidence, and that he's been here before. He hasn't really. I mean, his games played is really low, respectively to how he's acting as an NHLer, right? It seems like he's been around for a long time. So the more he does this, the more games he has and plays this way and makes those big saves, the more that swagger is going to continue to grow, and he's going to feel like, yeah, I belong here. This is my net. That's all good. Like, those are all good things for Toronto. So it's like I said before, it's trending in the right direction. It's absolutely what they need.
Confidence is definitely key. The more experience you gain, the better. And he's definitely getting that right now. And you talk about like making saves that he really shouldn't. That Jason Robertson save where he did the splits, number one, ouch. And number two, that was an insane save regardless. I can't believe he was able to pull that off. And everyone was joking about, like, do you do yoga? What do you do to get that flexibility? Just the God-given talent, I guess, is what he said post-game. But yeah, I agree. Again, confidence is sky high for him right now. This kind of serves as a perfect segue. Confidence is not so much there for Ilya Samsonov. It's been reported, or we're seeing in the news too, that, he's kind of in his own head at this moment. We know he struggled in the past, and we've seen him like overcome those struggles, especially last season when he was the number one starter. And now we're having that internal competition, maybe affecting his play, maybe not. Who knows? But at the same time, his game against the Nashville Predators looked a little bit better. Obviously, still some jittery moments in the first period, but you know what? 875 percentage is definitely much better than the 250 that he had against Tampa Bay. But, it's still, by what I'm going to say to you, Jim, is it's only one game. He still needs to, get up to speed, get up to the standard, and get up to the play where he had that 913 save percentage against the Florida Panthers. Those are the games that we want from Ilya Samsonov. Is that one game a big reason why he's still not getting the confidence, or is this still a big reason why he's still not established himself as the number one? And is he losing momentum as a result of that?
Well, there's good and there's bad when you're struggling like this, right? When you're a goaltender, who we all know are interesting individuals to begin with and kind of beat to their own drum, mental acuity, mental awareness, your own mental state is a huge part of that position, right? We've seen it with former Maple Leafs goaltender Jack Hamill, who's in Edmonton, who last year struggled mightily when it came to the mental aspects of his game, and it was a very bad season for him. He had some good games in the playoffs, but it just really wasn't there. He's been much better this year. So when you have a better mental state, You're playing much better. You're more confident. You feel like you're like, so that's a problem. If Samsonov is having those struggles this season, it can be very hard to get out of that, right?
Yeah.
Once you're kind of down in the dumps, it takes a lot to get you out of there. But that said, the good news or the positive silver lining, whatever you want to call it, here is that these tend to be highs and lows, right? So when you're feeling really low and your confidence is totally shaken, all you need is one really good game or two really good games in a row. And then it's almost like that other stuff never happened, right? Like you come back and you feel really good about your game and you're really confident, like you can make any save in the world. And then you can go on a run as equal to or better than the one that really puts you in a dumpster to begin with. So I'm not totally thinking that, Samsonov's a write-off or anything like that. It's going to be a struggle for him to get it back and to figure out how to deal with all of these, negatives or the stuff that's kicking him while he's down. But when he starts to get up, if he starts to play well, he should be able to ride that. And that should be a momentum gainer for him. So the hope here is that he does have a couple good outings, that he has a solid game, and then he repeats it with another solid game. And then he starts to feel better about himself. And when he does, I'm sure he'll play a whole lot better. So it's bad that he's having these mental struggles for sure. But I wouldn't say that it's a write-off on the season yet. Just, these swings can be pretty major.
Absolutely. There's similarities between both the Nashville game and the Florida Panthers game. Obviously, there was probably the first goal he would like to have back. It looked like, he was playing it well. Leg was a little bit off the ice. He was probably thinking that shot was from Ryan O'Reilly was going to go high, but it sneaks underneath his leg and it goes in. Can't do anything about that. Can't do anything about the second O'Reilly goal, where there was a deflection, great pass from Forsberg, but he probably would have liked to have had that Roman Josi game-winning goal in overtime. Kind of like he would have liked to have had that Oliver Ekman-Larsson shot against Florida. And again, that game was about, defensive lapses and everything like that. That's when he was at his best, when he was, being relied on. And that's the Samsonov that this team needs. And we saw that in the second and third period against Nashville. These are the games that he should be building off of, because he knew he was, making the right saves, not being over aggressive at times. And he was a little bit more in position. He wasn't coming out challenging players nonstop. He seemed a little bit more dialed in, a little bit more composed. Again, first period aside, he's still kind of nervous, but it seemed like he was able to work his way through that. That's what he needs to do consistently at this point. And it's easier said than done, but with the team that they have, with the goaltending coaches and everything like that on the Maple Leafs right now, they've helped them in the past. They can really help him now to get him back on the right track. And, I really think that is a good starting point for Samsonov. Yeah, it was a losing effort, but he did show a much more improvement, even compared to the first two games. I thought this was one of his better games, second to the Florida Panther game. But yeah, a lot of work that needs to be done, but you can still get the sense that the team is, going to support him no matter what. And I think if it was a different outcome, if the Maple Leafs won, I think maybe Samsonov could have gotten that, WWE style belt at the end of the game, because he did look fantastic in that game.
Yeah, no. And you hope it doesn't last long, whatever this rut is that he's been going through, that he figures his way out of it pretty quickly, because the downside of him not doing that is that he's on the last of his last year of the contract. The Maple Leafs are going to have to make a decision, because as good as Joseph Woll would be playing or could be playing heading into the playoffs, you can't rely on him, right? Like you can't just go in and going, oh yeah, Joseph Woll is our guy, we don't need a back. You need a backup. Like he's got so few NHL games on his resume that it could swing the other way in a heartbeat. So you need Samsonov to find some semblance of his game, right? And if he doesn't, you're gonna have to make a decision, because you need two guys in Toronto when you have the inexperienced Woll as your starter. If that's what he ends up being, you need somebody to back him up, because if something happens there, he's never been through that, right? So you need to know you've got at least option B.
Yeah, and I think that's why they got Martin Jones as that reassurance. Obviously, different situation because of his cap, because of waivers and everything like that. It's a little bit difficult, because if you bring him up and you send him back down, I think it's something that you probably can work in your favor, because a lot of teams were warded off because they had to pay that extra $1 million the first time around. I don't know if that's going to be the case right now, but there was that clause in Martin Jones's contract. But maybe you could still work out if he does get called up. If Samsonov needs to have a conditioning stint, maybe you send him down. But then again, you run that risk of losing either one of Jones and Samsonov as well. we'll see what happens if they do even address it and bring in another goaltender and maybe feel like Joseph Woll is the guy going forward, but you want a veteran presence in the crease as well to give him that reassurance and give him someone who has the experience to help him out during this time as well. I think that'll be huge if that is the case.
Yeah, no, ideally they both get it going. Wall continues to play well and Samsonov finds, a good chunk of what he had last season. If that's the case, Toronto will be in good shape.
Absolutely. And before we get into the second half of our show, don't forget to subscribe to the Maple Leaf Substack presented by the Hockey Writers. There's going to be a link in the description below, in the video description, by the way, and you can sign up. You'll get all the great content from our Maple Leafs team over at THW, from Jim and myself. Be sure to sign up and you can get everything delivered to your inbox multiple times per week. Kicking off the second half of our show, we knew that the defense was going to be a concern just with their overall play, but now it seems like the injury bug continues to, take advantage of the blue line that's already a question mark to begin the season. There was already Connor Timmins during the preseason. He's out. Probably the timeline may start to be coming a little bit closer than expected, but there was Jake McCabe who suffered a groin injury against the Dallas Stars. Timothy Liljegren looked like he was in a lot of discomfort against the Nashville Predators where he was dealing with an upper body ailment. And, even I think Morgan Rielly took a shot off his hand at one point. So it seems like at this point right now, we always joking about like how we need to bubble wrap the Maple Leafs defense to keep them safe and injury free. Maybe a little bit cause for concern, not for their play, but for the injuries right now. Jim, is this something that the Maple Leafs can manage? And we always talk about, adding another piece right now. Could that come sooner than later, aside from the defensive play?
Well, somebody could correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I don't see how the Toronto Maple Leafs can add anybody unless one of these players goes on LTIR. And in that situation, Jake McCabe's not going on LTIR. He's going to be short term. Neither would Liljegren. So you knock on wood, nobody does go. Could you imagine if they lost Rielly on LTIR or something like that? Like that would be devastating, right? So that's
something you don't want to say right now.
No, you know what I mean, though. Like you can't. So many teams, and it's not just Toronto. I mean, I think there's like 14 teams in LTIR right now, and operating in that way. Like they have literally no cap space to do anything with their roster unless a player goes on long term that they would be able to then bring somebody in knowing that player's like done for the year. Like it happened last year with Muzzin and stuff, right? Like that's the kind of situation where you'd probably have to be in. Like I said, somebody correct me if I'm wrong there, but it's concerning. Injuries are always concerning unless you're one of those teams that has like 8 defensemen that you can call on at any time and call up in emergency situations or what have you. Then I guess you have the depth there, but it's problematic. You don't want any injuries to knock you down or something, especially if some of the guys aren't playing very well. Which we're going to talk about Morgan Rielly, how well he's playing, but like Klingberg hasn't been all that great. There's been some struggles among their pairings and trying to figure out who should go with who, and chemistry has been an issue. So it's not like they're, everybody's all world right now. They're certainly not playing to the level where you can go, well, we can afford to lose one guy here or miss a couple games there because these other guys will make up for it. You don't know that. Like it's just, it's the weakness on this team, right? That's the biggest issue is the blue line. And we knew that it needed to be addressed in the offseason. And the more these injuries pile up, if they do, the bigger the problem it becomes and the more glaring and obvious the hole is. So it's a concern for sure.
I think the good news to take out of all of this is it's only like, a day-to-day kind of thing. They expect McCabe to practice midweek as well, but they're expecting him to come back. The fact that Liljegren was on the ice during morning skate was a good sign that maybe they just held him out of a precaution and, they didn't want to like take a chance if it was anything bad. But good news on the front for both of those two defenders because they are really key in their own regard. McCabe seemed to have started picking his play up. Liljegren seemed to be a little bit more composed and a little bit more calm playing with Giordano. I'm really starting to like that chemistry that they've had going on again because it's been there for quite some time. But you don't want it. I would say this, it's better to probably deal with this right now than later on where you're going to be scrambling to try and figure out what to do with your roster, especially come trade deadline. Obviously you can't predict when injuries are going to happen, but uh, it's difficult to try and get a sense of that. But I do think that, if it does end, this is probably the perfect time where it does end and everyone can stay healthy for the long term. And you don't want anything serious to happen at this point.
Yeah, you don't ever want anything serious to happen unless you didn't like your roster coming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're the GM that built your team and you said, "Man, my blue line sucks. I really need an injury so I can go out and get somebody else." I mean, what kind of team did you build, right? Like that's certainly not the mentality that any GM is probably thinking about. So yeah, you never want to wish injury on anybody. You don't want anybody to be hurt. You don't want the thought of, I didn't put a very good roster together, so wouldn't it be convenient if somebody went down so I could get somebody like it's you. This is your team. This is your blue line, right? This is the guys you're running with. You need to find and make it work, and you need to hope that they stay injury free and that they play well and they find chemistry. And if they can't, be the thing that picks up your team, that you can outscore with your opponent, because that's kind of what this team's going to need.
Absolutely. And even the game against Dallas, I was a little bit concerned when I didn't see McCabe and I saw Rielly paired up with Klingberg. I'm like, that's kind of a recipe for a disaster. If you
better hope it stays in that zone the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. And when I saw the replay of, McCabe leaving 10 seconds in, that's when I kind of figured, okay, that is why we saw that pairing, because they're down to defensemen. But, kudos to the blue line for sticking through it and, playing relatively well during that time when, a key minute eater is out of the lineup and everyone pulled their weight. So you don't want to continue to do that given how well or, how there are the concerns with their play. But you know what? Even against Nashville, everybody did their part for the most part in trying to get the extra points. Didn't quite happen, but you know what? I think the defense is starting to slowly come together in regards to their pairings and developing that chemistry right now.
Yeah. And you hope whatever they're talking about with the injuries, I was reading today an article on The Athletic, is that the Maple Leafs are taking a kind of an interesting approach to how they're talking about the injuries. So we don't really know how serious some of these things are. They're sort of hiding it. They're not being very upfront about what is going on with some of these players. So you just hope that they're all really minor, like that they're not major things at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, like we said with the injuries, the fact that they're minor with two key players, that's the most important thing to take out of all of this.
Yeah, for sure.
Moving on to our the next topic, let's talk about the dynamic duo. And I am not talking about Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, but the play of William Nylander and John Tavares right now. I really am not necessarily surprised, but I am happy that it's those two leading the pack right now in terms of point production, because Nylander's in his contract year. We know there's a lot of talk and buzz about, is he going to sign? Is he not going to sign? What's happening there? Is there positivity? Is there negativity in regards to the negotiations? Tavares has been getting a lot of heat over the past few seasons. Even though he's been producing at a point per game pace, it's still not enough given the $11 million. But it seems like both players are taking that to heart, and it seems like they're lashing out with their frustration with the production at this rate. Obviously, Nylander leading the way with 12 points. Tavares, 11, 33 combined between, or 23 combined between the two of them right now. That's impressive right now. Jim, what are your thoughts about the early season chemistry with Nylander and Tavares right now?
Well, it's like 90% great and 10% problematic, right? Like,
yeah,
because
there's always that 10%.
Well, we've talked about it a lot in the shows prior to this one, and I just wrote an article about Nylander and how he's pricing himself into an entirely different stratosphere when it comes to negotiations with Toronto, or maybe his willingness to test the free market or things like that, because he's on the last year of his contract and he keeps going the way he's going. I mean, who knows what's going to come his way in terms of offers, right? So that's the 10%, right? That you're just like, but the 90% is that you have these guys meshing really, really well. They're playing lights out and you're winning hockey games because of it. So that's what you're dealing with. You're in the now, right? The Toronto Maple Leafs are in the now. Their windows right now. They need these guys to be, building chemistry. And Marner and Matthews, you talked about, this is not the dynamic duo that we're talking about. I mean, they're still playing all right. They just haven't clicked quite yet. You know what I mean? Like they have in the past. So the fact that Nylander and Tavares have kicked it off so well, and they're starting the season on fire like this is great. So you're not complaining. If you're, glass half empty kind of skeptic, sort of whatever, you're going, okay, I mean, what's this mean for Nylander? And, I write about that kind of stuff a lot. So I've been thinking about it, but I'm going to take what I can get when you get Nylander and Tavares, lights out hockey, right? So it's great. It's 90% good.
Yeah. Also, the production from the two both have a even strength points at this point, so they're not relying heavily on the power play. They're doing a lot of their damage at 5-on-5, which is a really good sign. And yeah, I mean, it really is great to see in regards to that, because like I said before, the fact that there are a lot of storylines between these two players right now, I think this is a welcoming sign that whatever's being talked about them, it's fueling them a little bit more. And we saw that last year with both players. It seemed like they were having another gear, and we saw, Nylander and Tavares talk about each other very highly right now. The pace that they're on right now is just absolutely tremendous. I believe per Hockey Reference, if I'm reading this correctly, an adjusted 82 game pace for Nylander is at 125 points. Tavares, I believe, is at 114 for his pace. 114, yes. So both, obviously, that's not sustainable, but you can't help but acknowledge that what these players are doing right now and alleviating some of that pressure off Matthews and Marner, that, the core four is definitely or other players at the core four are pulling their weight.
Yeah. The Nylander thing doesn't surprise me at all, right? Like, how can you not be motivated when you're in a contract year? You've seen Austin Matthews get the deal he gets. You're not getting the deal you want. You said you want to stay in Toronto. Now you just got to show everybody why they should keep you. So that doesn't surprise me that he's playing this guy. And he's great. Like, he's super dynamic, super skilled. When he wants to play well, he always has played well. The questions have always been whether or not he's always motivated. Well, he's motivated now, right? So the Nylander thing doesn't surprise me. The Tavares, a little bit, right? Yeah, he's consistently put up points, and he's been a really good hockey player. The numbers don't always align. He's paid a lot of money, but when you're playing this well and you want to shove it in people's faces that, hey, by the way, don't write me off yet, then I suppose we shouldn't be surprised. I was a little surprised with his start. Hopefully he keeps it going. But the Nylander thing doesn't shock me at all.
Absolutely. And speaking of surprises, Morgan Rielly is off to another we talked about him a little bit earlier, off to a really great start himself. 7 points in 8 games, on pace for 73 points a season, which would put him one above the 72 that he had in 2018-19. Is this a sign that we're seeing that the best side of Morgan Rielly since that season? And are we seeing a little bit more of, not necessarily a Norris contender, but he was in contention for that last year or during that season as like a top 5 defender. Are we seeing that player again right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't love doing the whole who's in the trophy race in October kind of conversation.
For sure.
I mean, we're almost in November. It's a little early,
though.
But some of these guys are making a case that, maybe you throw their hat into this thing in a month. But the thing that impresses me most about Morgan Rielly is that he's not getting first power play time, right? So he's doing this 5-on-5. He's doing this in other ways. He's playing 24 minutes a game. He's way outplaying John Klingberg, who's getting the prime opportunities. Rielly's been great. Like, this is I mean, you talk about motivation with guys like Nylander and Tavares. I don't know, because Rielly's always said that he's very comfortable just playing whatever role he's asked to play, and he's okay with this. But maybe down inside, he's like, okay, well, I'll show you. You're going to bring in John Klingberg when I was here this whole time, and I had a really good playoffs, and I finished the year really strong, and you didn't need to go out and get him. I'm sure he doesn't have any ill will towards John Klingberg, but maybe he's a little motivated. Or maybe there's a little fire under his butt, right? So, Rielly's played great. You can't ask for more out of a guy who's been sort of delegated to a second tier role, and he's killing it.
Yeah, not even just offensively too. He seems a little bit more calm defensively, and he seems a little bit more reliable within his defensive zone. I don't know if it's just a reunion with TJ Brody that's having a big impact, or we saw that when he was playing with the steady stay-at-home defender in Luke Shen. But I think right now, having that chemistry with Brody early on, getting back to form, I think he's in a really good spot right now. I don't think there's a lot of pressure on him per se with the power play. I think he's just playing his game when he needs to. And if he does get the power play time, great. I think that's going to come with time, but he's handled himself very well. Production wise, within his own zone, you're seeing a little bit more of that competitive drive from him on the back end. And I think that's really, really important to see in his game right now.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at this thing here. He's been lining up for more defensive zone draws and stuff like that too. So they're putting him in situations where they're not relying on the things they would ask Klingberg to do, where they're just giving him the gravy minutes, right? They're saying, here, go in the power play, take the zone offensive zone draws, just do all this stuff where you can do what you do. They're putting Rielly in situations where it's like, this could not go well if you don't make the right play immediately. And so he's doing that, right? Like, so it's been a very solid season so far for him in all aspects of the game. And like I said before, to do that when you've been asked to sort of take a step backwards in a role that you're used to, it says a lot about him as his character and as person and his willingness to do whatever it needs to be done for this team to win and step up in whatever roles asked of him. So kudos to him. He's done a great job.
The number one defender playing like a number one defender. That's what you want to see early on this season. That is all the time that we have for this episode of Maple Leafs Lounge. Thank you for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to the Maple Leaf Substack presented by not presented, but done by the Hockey Writers. You will get all the great content from our Maple Leaf staff, including from Jim and myself. Link is in the description below. Type in your email and you will get everything delivered to your inbox multiple times per week. Once again, that is all for this episode. For Jim Parsons, I'm Peter Baracchini, and we'll see you next time on the Maple Leafs Lounge.